What would be your answer to the broad criticism that the direction of your ministry is excessively scholarly academic? Now, I'm going to stop the comment right here and answer that question before we go on with the rest of the question. My response or my answer to said broad criticism is thank you. If you think that Torah Resource or the Rob and Caleb Show is excessively scholarly, good. That's the goal. We'll talk about that more in a few seconds.
But it's framed as a criticism?
Yes. Yes, it is. So to that criticism, I say thanks. If you see that as a criticism, it and I'm not saying this person does. It sounds like he's saying that other people have said this before. So
yeah, that's what it sounds like too.
Okay. So if other people are saying that, great. Then if that's your criticism, then man, I don't know where you're at. But so he goes on. The early apostles and martyrs had none of these things. That's absolutely not true. In fact, I would categorically disagree with that. But had a faith and sanctification far above ours. I don't know if I agree with that either. I do think that there is something very significant and special about being able to walk with and talk to the Messiah. But the early church fathers, I don't think that their sanctification was necessarily above ours. Their lives might have looked different. Sanctification comes through the Torah, right? Loving your neighbor as yourself.
Their sanctification was, one more time, how does it phrase?
The early apostles and martyrs had none of these things. I think he's talking about scholarly academic.
Okay.
The martyrs had none of these things, but had a faith and sanctification far above ours. Let's answer this one step at a time. The apostles and martyrs had none of these things. When he says none of these things, I'm assuming that he's saying scholarly academic, because but the problem is that that's certainly not true. Living with your teacher 365 days, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I've never done that. That's a lot more schooling than I think I'll ever have, especially if it's with the Messiah, right? So, I mean, the idea that they didn't have any scholarly academic knowledge is simply not true. The other thing is that the apostles seem to have been quite learned for the time period that they lived in. They all wrote, right? Paul knew Hebrew and Greek, and it seems like he knew Aramaic as well. Seems like the apostles did too. And for being fishermen who could read and write bilingually, it seems to be the case. I think that they were quite well learned.
Yeah. And another point is, if by scholarship, which is the criticism, I think that, now I might be conflating this listener's point, but Caleb, we've been doing this for how many years now?
4 years.
And we've gotten criticism for calling out ministries or false teachers that we think are false, etc., like that. Like we shouldn't be doing that. Well, if we want to look at what the apostles were doing, if scholarship has to do with sharpening your sword enough to discern between what is food and what is chaff and what is good teaching versus what is false teaching, and if scholarship concerns upholding the scriptures as God inspired over against creeping in of false doctrines, then they were greater scholars than we are.
I'm not trying to say that my faith or even my sanctification is on the same plane as the apostles. But what I'm saying is that it seems like people in our faith today, in the faith of Yeshua today, we certainly have men and women who are truly on the path of great sanctification. And even to the level, I think, of some of the first believers in the Messiah Yeshua. So, but I think that what's going on here is we have a misconstrual of what scholarship is. We'll talk about this more in a few seconds. So let's keep going here with this. I mean, back to the quote. I mean, people nowadays are just so polluted by this harlotry society, oversaturated by information. I somewhat agree with that. However, once again, I think that going back, I mean, we're using
hence the need for that sharp,
for scholarship, for good scholarship, right? Yeah. They go on. I think your contribution to conferences like the SBL is a great thing, but there comes a time when a person's soul no longer has a use for man-made theological pontifications. Eastern people like me have always comprehended this better. So now we're dividing Eastern people versus Western people. That's not even where. Let's start even before that. Let's start before that. He says. But there comes a time when a person's soul no longer has a use for man-made theological pontifications. Is this what you think scholarship is? If you think that scholarship is man-made pontifications, guess what? You have missed the idea of what we're talking about. Scholarship is the ability to accurately handle the Word of God and to do so in a historical, grammatical way, to look at the history and say this is what was meant by the text. The fact that the fact that I'm reading this in a language like English, I'm reading this person's comment, and the fact that this person's comment was written in a language is part of scholarship. It's part of learning. Yeah. It's part of, that's right. And the fact that it's in English, and see, Caleb, English, believe it or not, the English language was around before you and I were even born. So we're speaking words that probably Shakespeare, probably 90% of the words that we use today, you can probably find in Shakespeare. So how many years ago was that? So right there, we're using tradition to communicate. Well, let's look at the Oxford Dictionary definition of what scholarship is. Scholarship is academic study or achievement, learning of a high level. The scriptures talk about being well equipped, being able to handle the scriptures. This is what scholarship is. If you think that scholarship is theological pontification, man-made, think again. The fact that you read a Bible, in any language, including Hebrew, comes from scholarship. Or the fact that you learned a language like Hebrew, Greek, or even English, once again, comes from scholarship. What we are promoting is good scholarship. That is scholarship that, and look, we've talked about this before, but someone like Dr. Dr. Bach. Okay, now I disagree with Dr. Bach. He's a great Lucan scholar. His large works have been on Luke and Acts. He has worked very closely with some groups like Chosen People Ministries, and he's done great work down in Dallas Theological Seminary. I disagree with Dr. Bach on quite a few things. And I've interviewed him, and we discussed some of our differences, especially when it came to Acts and Acts 15 and these kind of things. He's a good scholar. I disagree with him, but he's a good scholar. Scholarship doesn't mean that everybody agrees the same. Scholarship means that we use a set of we use our minds to try to understand texts better and to be able to understand the Word of God. Now, he's come up with... And it's an arena where there's challenge. Exactly. Right? I mean, we challenge one another. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share this video. Rob and I try to promote 3 things on this show: good scholarship, solid theology, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can do that by hovering over the round thing below me and then clicking the subscribe button. You should do that.